Fox News confirm that Sean Spicer has resigned as White House press secretary. We are waiting to bring in our own John Roberts, who will bring his reporting with him. Right now, Sandra and I are getting his alert emails as he's learning things. And now, White House correspondent John Roberts is at the White House outside with more on this. John?
Hey, Harris, this was really kind of a shock that Sean Spicer resigned. We did know that this was going to provoke a big palace intrigue battle if Anthony Scaramucci, who was a contributor at the Fox Business Network, were to come on board as the communications director, because the way that the communications shop was going to be structured under Sean Spicer was that he was going to be sort of akin to a deputy chief of staff for communications. So he would be at the head here, and then the communications director would come underneath him, and the press secretary would come underneath him, and they would both report on up the chain to him. But Anthony Scaramucci, who is very close to the president, was very heavily involved in communications during the transition, was a person who did not want to be under let's say a deputy chief of staff for communications. He wanted to have a direct line to the president. And we're still waiting for absolute confirmation from the White House on all of this. But it's our understanding that Sean Spicer really objected to the idea of Scaramucci being brought in as the communications director, and that he tendered his resignation sometime during this meeting that Scaramucci had with the president. We do know that Scaramucci was being brought in at 10 o'clock this morning. We reported this earlier, for a meeting because the president wanted him to be the communications director. And the reason why the president wanted him to be the communications director is because he knows that Scaramucci is a fighter. He is a tireless advocate for the president. He really knows how to throw a punch. And that was witnessed just in recent weeks when he went after CNN for what he said was false reporting about ties between one of his former companies and Russian business people. It turned out that that report was not true, and CNN was forced to fire 3 people who had been at the network for some time for writing that report. So the president likes the way that he gets out there and forcefully defends himself, and will forcefully defend this White House. But again, this whole thing was at odds with the current power structure in the White House. I'm told that Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon were not apprised of this, and the president does this a lot, that he'll meet with somebody who he likes and say, hey, do you want this job, without telling anybody else about it. So he understands that there was pushback from Bannon and Priebus, and then Spicer, being aligned with Priebus, didn't like it, and apparently has thrown in the towel. Again, we are awaiting official word from the White House, but this all revolves around the idea that the president wanted his man in the communications director position. That man is Anthony Scaramucci. Scaramucci was not interested in going through a chain of command back to the president. He wanted to have a direct line of communication. Sean Spicer apparently did not like that idea, or the idea of Scaramucci being installed in that position. And so now apparently he has tendered his resignation. We hope to find out officially from the White House very soon. There was a big meeting going on in the press secretary's office just a short time ago. We were all ushered out of that area, but we should be brought in soon to learn what the finer points of all of this were. But what a Friday morning, Harris.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I picked up on what you said, though. This is kind of, art of the deal style. Of course, you don't tell anybody what you're about to do with regard to someone who's going to be the person in charge of the messaging coming out of the White House when you know you've been anemic in that area for months and months. I have a big question, though. So you talk about who steps up into Sean Spicer's role. Sarah Huckabee Sanders has been doing that when he is not in that role as White House press secretary. What do you know about her experience and what's being said from the White House about her experience that they might look to her to step into that role, effectively becoming Anthony Scaramucci's boss? If he didn't want Sean Spicer, is Sarah Huckabee Sanders somebody that he would be considering comfortable to be with?
All right, let's straighten out the workflow here at the White House. First of all, Harris, the communications director does not report to the press secretary. In the hierarchy that has existed up until now in White Houses, previous White Houses, the communications director reports directly to the president. The press secretary reports directly to the president. They are parallel, and pretty much co-equal, though in some cases the communications director is seen to be the senior member. For example, during the Bush administration, when Dan Bartlett was the communications director, he was seen to be the senior over the press secretary, because he was working on issues of broader strategic communications throughout the administration and was not the person out there at the daily press briefing. That said, the communications director does go on camera from time to time, particularly on the Sunday shows or when there was very big news or something that deals really with intimate issues concerning the president. So whoever becomes the press secretary, and it could be Sarah Huckabee Sanders because the president really likes her, thinks she has a very good presentation, thinks that she deals with the press well, or it could be somebody else entirely. Scaramucci will report directly to the president and will not report to the press secretary. But that's still an open question as to who is going to fill that role on a full-time basis.
Hey, John, it's Sandra Smith. So what do you know about, you said Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon did not know about this beforehand. Right. Based on that, do you know if they've been, I mean, are they going to be pushing back on this? Obviously, we know that Reince Priebus and Anthony Scaramucci don't have good relations in the past.
Yeah, it's too late now. It's a done deal. And without giving away too many secrets, I'm told that there was a lot of pushback on this last night. Scaramucci went in there this morning to this meeting at the invitation of the president. And the president hires who the president wants to hire. And he clearly was hired over the objections of some of the other senior staff, which could set up some more palace intrigue going forward. I mean, we hear stories, and I got to be perfectly candid with you on this. We hear stories of how everything is wonderful at the White House and everybody's getting along. You talk to people who are in the know about these things, it's a running gun battle with fixed bayonets at times. All of these competing interests and these competing fiefdoms inside the White House. So this really kind of adds another one. You know, that the line between Reince Priebus and Sean Spicer was a tight one. It was born over years of camaraderie at the Republican National Committee. Now that Scaramucci is going to be in there, apparently, again, this has to be fully confirmed and officially confirmed by the White House, because until it's out there on paper, anything can happen. This will create potentially another point of conflict. But it's no question that the president has not been happy with the communications shop. He wants somebody in there who he thinks is going to fight tooth and nail for him. Scaramucci has proven that. He has the trust of the president, and so he's going to be the one that survives this first battle, and we'll see about battles going forward.
John, this is Melissa Francis. I mean, tell us even a little bit more about that. What does it mean for Reince Priebus? What does it mean for Steve Bannon? I mean, these are the battle lines, the people that were there first, who are more Washington establishment or Republican establishment, versus the new folks who came in and were sort of thrown overboard, a lot of people felt, when the administration then won and moved on to Washington. There were some people who said, hey, what about the people that were there from the beginning that believed in the president when no one else did, and when the rest of the party didn't? And, you know, what does it mean for them? So tell us more about how this displaces, or what it says about what's to come for those other folks.
Well, you talk about people who believed in the president before anybody else did. You need to count Scaramucci among them. He just was not part of the party establishment. You know, he came from Wall Street. He ran Skybridge Capital. He was also a contributor for the Fox Business Network, was on Mornings with Maria as a regular fixture every day. But he was always there at the president's side. During the transition, he was shepherding through some of the very high-profile people who were coming in to be interviewed for jobs, David Petraeus among them. So to say that he's a newcomer to the Trump organization is not exactly accurate, because he has been there for a long, long time. You could suggest that people like Reince Priebus and even Steve Bannon are relative newcomers to the scene. Bannon was brought on in the summertime of last year. Scaramucci had known the president quite well a long time before that. Reince Priebus and the RNC were playing a very neutral role before he became the chief of staff here at the White House. And don't forget, too, the jobs are different. You got the communications director, you have the press secretary. They tend to work together. Bannon is the chief strategist. He's in a different orbit. And Reince Priebus is the chief of staff, another different orbit. So there are all these orbits. They do intersect, and it's at those points of intersection where often you have friction. And that will be in those senior staff meetings.
All right. John Roberts, thank you very much.